All right, let's dive in. This time, you've given us quite a stack of sources on the Zodiac killer case: news articles, police reports, even an audio documentary.
Oh, wow.
It's clear you want to go beyond the headlines and really get into this mystery.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
It is. So that's exactly what we'll do. We've got excerpts from a true crime podcast, news articles, like I said, and even some reclassified police files.
Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us.
We do. So, ready to uncover the truth about the Zodiac, or at least get as close as we can with the evidence we have.
Absolutely. Let's see what we can make of all this.
Okay. Our goal is to separate fact from fiction, highlight the key players and incidents, and explore some of the more obscure details that might surprise even seasoned Zodiac enthusiasts.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so December 1968, a young couple, David Faraday and Biddy Lou Jensen, are on their first date, parked on a lover's lane.
Yeah. Tragically, it becomes the first scene in this terrifying saga.
It does, and
What's striking is how the brutality of the murders, right from the start, sets the stage for the reign of terror that followed.
exactly, it's just so brutal and seemingly random.
And it escalated so quickly.
It did. Just a few months later, in July 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau are attacked.
Similar circumstances, but this time in a more public area.
Right.
And crucially, Mageau survives to tell the tale.
Which is incredible that he survived,
Yeah.
and his account was invaluable, combined with the chilling phone call from someone claiming to be the killer.
Right. It really amplified the fear gripping the community.
Oh, absolutely. And then, of course, came the letters.
With that iconic Zodiac symbol.
Yeah, it's like branding himself almost.
He was. Suddenly, this case wasn't just local news anymore. It was a national obsession.
Oh, for sure.
He wasn't just a killer. He was a media manipulator. Think about the 408 cipher. People spent years trying to decode it,
Oh, yeah.
hoping for that one clue that would unmask it.
Right, and when it was finally cracked in 2020, instead of a name or location.
It was more of a taunt.
Right.
It was a letdown on one hand, but on the other, it reinforced this idea that the Zodiac was playing a game.
Totally.
He was in control, feeding off the public's fascination.
Which brings us to this whole idea of linguistic forensics. I mean, can you really tell that much about a person from how they write?
Absolutely. Think of it like a fingerprint, but for language. Experts were poring over those letters, looking at things like sentence structure, word choices, even punctuation, all trying to build a profile of the Zodiac.
Oh, wow. So what were they looking for? What kind of insights were they hoping to gain?
Well, they wanted to know his education level, his background, his possible occupation. Were there any regional dialects in his writing? Did he use particular phrases that could link him to a certain area or social group?
Wow.
It's like putting together a puzzle, one word at a time.
So then things take an even darker turn with the attack at Lake Berryessa in September 1969. And this is where we see the Zodiac fully embracing that terrifying persona. Showing up in a hooded costume with the crosshair symbol, it's almost theatrical.
And again, we have a survivor, Brian Hartnell. His description of the attacker's appearance and behavior was incredibly detailed. It solidified that image of the Zodiac as someone methodical, deliberate, someone who relished the terror he inflicted.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much of that persona was genuine and how much was a calculated performance designed to mislead investigators. Was he trying to throw them off by creating this larger-than-life character?
That's a question that's haunted this case for years.
Yeah.
Did he want to be caught, or was the game of cat and mouse the whole point?
Right. And speaking of a game changer, in October 1969, we have the murder of Paul Stein, a San Francisco cab driver.
Absolutely.
What?
Felt like an escalation, targeting someone seemingly at random.
Yes.
And for a while, it seemed like the police might finally have their break. Witnesses saw the killer wiping down the cab, possibly leaving fingerprints. They had a detailed police sketch that was widely circulated.
You'd think that would be enough to put the pressure on, but then things just get murkier. We start getting a series of incidents that are just hard to definitively connect, you know? Like the Kathleen Johns case. This woman is driving with her baby, and a man tampers with her car, then drives her around for hours. Terrifying.
It was certainly chilling, but was it the Zodiac or someone mimicking his MO? The uncertainty just fueled the public's anxiety.
Right, and then there's the murder of Robert Salem with the Satan saves Zodiac message left behind.
Right.
The MO is different enough that some doubt it's connected, but that message is unsettling, to say the least.
Exactly. It plays into this idea that the Zodiac was intentionally weaving this web of misinformation,
Yes.
making it harder to separate truth from fiction.
For sure.
And then we have the Donna Lass disappearance, where that cryptic Sierra Club postcard seems to point to the Zodiac. Or does it?
It's like he wanted to make sure the investigation went in circles.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it worked. Years go by without any major breakthroughs. But one name keeps coming up: Arthur Lee Allen.
Allen, the prime suspect for so long, a former teacher, already a convicted child molester. He definitely had a dark side. A tip from his friend Donald Cheney put him on the police's radar.
And there were all these seemingly incriminating details. He resembled the composite sketches, owned a Zodiac brand watch, was into guns and explosives, even had a royal typewriter like the one the Zodiac used. It's almost too much to be coincidence, right?
There was that chilling detail about the knives, too. When the police questioned him, Allen brought them up, claiming they had blood on them. It's like he was almost daring them to suspect him.
Oh, wow. But despite all that circumstantial evidence, no physical evidence ever directly linked him to the crimes. And then in 2002, DNA testing ruled him out.
Talk about a blow to the investigation.
Huge.
It's a stark reminder that even in a case this high profile, assumptions can be misleading. We can't let our desire for answers cloud our judgment.
So Allen's off the hook, but the story doesn't end there. We have another intriguing suspect, Richard Marshall, and his entry into the case is pretty strange, right?
Indeed, a ham radio enthusiast contacts the authorities, deeply disturbed by Marshall's behavior and his disturbing collection of artwork. This wasn't your average art aficionado. We're talking deeply unsettling imagery.
And then there's Marshall's comment about finding something more exciting than sex. I mean, that sends chills down your spine, right?
Chilling indeed. And just like Allen, Marshall had a royal typewriter and a military background. He even resembled some descriptions of the Zodiac. But again, no conclusive evidence.
So, two prime suspects, both with these tantalizing connections to the case, but neither could be definitively proven to be the Zodiac. It's frustrating, to say the least.
What's fascinating is how the Zodiac seemed to anticipate this. He deliberately disguised his handwriting, carefully chose his victims to avoid leaving obvious links, and used the media to his advantage. He understood how to create confusion and exploit our desire for answers.
It's like he was a master manipulator, basically.
He was.
And after 1978, the confirmed communications just stopped. Did he die, get locked up for something else? Or did he just decide to retire from his reign of terror?
We can only speculate. But the case wouldn't stay cold forever. In 2007, something happened that reignited public interest and led the San Francisco police to reopen the investigation.
The release of David Fincher's movie Zodiac. Talk about bringing a cold case back to life.
It was based on the book by Robert Graysmith, the cartoonist turned amateur Zodiac sleuth, who was utterly convinced that Arthur Lee Allen was the killer. The movie brought all those theories and details back into the spotlight.
It's like the Zodiac was reaching out from the past, reminding us that he was still out there. And speaking of reaching out, remember that 340 cipher we talked about earlier? The one that took decades to decode.
The one that turned out to be more taunts, sadly. But it did help eliminate one false lead. A man named Sam, who'd called into a TV show claiming to be the Zodiac.
Right, so even if the content was disappointing, it still moved the investigation forward by debunking that claim. But here's where things get really strange. In 2007, a red envelope addressed to the editor of the San Francisco Chronicle turns up.
It had been postmarked in 1990, somehow lost in the system for almost 17 years. Inside, a Christmas card with a snowman wearing a Groucho Marx mask and a photocopy of 2 postal keys.
Seriously, this guy knew how to make an entrance, even years after going silent. What did those keys mean, though?
Investigators traced them back to a post office box in Eureka, California, but the owner was eventually ruled out as a suspect. The significance of the keys remains a mystery. Another dead end.
It's almost like the Zodiac was toying with the authorities, sending them on a wild goose chase.
But even with all these dead ends, there's still hope. The investigation is ongoing, and with advances in DNA and genealogical testing, we might yet get those answers we've been seeking for so long.
Like how they caught the Golden State Killer using those ancestry databases. Could that be the key to unlocking this case too?
Absolutely. Investigators have confirmed that DNA samples from the Zodiac case are being analyzed, hoping to create a full genetic profile that can be run through those databases. It's a long shot, but it's a shot nonetheless.
Which brings us back to Arthur Lee Allen. Even after the DNA testing excluded him, some people, including Detective Toshi, remain convinced that he was the Zodiac. What do you make of that?
It's interesting, isn't it? The DNA they used came from the outside of one of the Zodiac stamps. That means it could have belonged to anyone who handled the letter, not necessarily the person who licked it.
So even if Alan was sending letters, someone else could have licked the stamps.
Exactly.
That's a game changer. It throws everything we thought we knew into question.
Exactly. And that's why investigators are so focused on obtaining a full DNA profile from the actual evidence, not just the envelopes. We need that irrefutable link.
But with Alan's death in 1992, it seems like any hope of a confession died with him.
True, but even in death, he managed to hold on to some of that mystique. The police searched his home after he died and found some unsettling things. Bomb-making materials, instructions for booby traps.
Didn't they also find a VHS tape? Something about Alan ranting about the police?
Yes, but no confession, sadly. Just more taunts, more attempts to control the narrative, even from beyond the grave.
So even in death, he was still manipulating, still playing games. It's just unbelievable. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
Not quite. In 2021, the Case Breakers, a group of independent investigators, announced that they believed they had identified the Zodiac killer, Gary Francis Post, a deceased U.S. Air Force veteran.
Right, I remember that making headlines.
Right.
But their case is largely based on circumstantial evidence, isn't it? What are some of the key points they're using to support their claim? They point to physical similarities between Post and the Zodiac.
Yes, they've analyzed photos and believe there are some compelling resemblances.
And they've also dug into Post's background, haven't they? Trying to find any potential connections to the victims or the locations of the crimes.
Exactly. They've uncovered some intriguing links that warrant further investigation, but so far, nothing conclusive.
But there's that one detail that really caught my attention, the scar on Post's forehead.
Ah, yes, the Case Breakers claim that they've decoded the scar and believe it spells out Zodiac.
It sounds like something right out of a movie. But hasn't law enforcement been pretty skeptical of their findings?
They have. Officially, they haven't confirmed the Case Breakers theory, and a lot of experts remain unconvinced.
So another possible lead, another twist in this never-ending saga. It's almost like the Zodiac planned it this way, to keep us guessing even after all these years.
It's a testament to how effectively he manipulated the narrative.
Hmm.
He created a mystery that seems impossible to solve, and that's part of why it continues to fascinate us.
It's like he understood the power of the unknown. Our brains crave answers, and when we don't get them, we become even more obsessed.
Precisely. He tapped into our deepest fears and insecurities, playing on our need for order and control in a world that often feels chaotic.
And in a way, he succeeded. He became a cultural icon, a symbol of both our fascination with true crime and our anxieties about the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life.
He's a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology and forensic science, some mysteries may never be fully solved.
But even if we never definitively identify the Zodiac, there's still so much we can learn from this case. It's a crash course in criminal profiling, the power of media manipulation, and the enduring allure of the unsolved.
And it highlights the importance of critical thinking. We have to be careful about jumping to conclusions or letting our biases influence our interpretation of the evidence.
It's a reminder that the truth is often elusive, and the journey to find it can be long and winding.
But that journey itself can be incredibly valuable. It forces us to confront our assumptions, question our perceptions, and delve into the complexities of human behavior.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Zodiac killer case, what stands out to you? What's the one thing you'll take away from all this?
For me, it's the realization that sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
That's a great point. And for you, dear listener, here's something to ponder. If the Zodiac was deliberately crafting a persona, how much of what we think we know about him can we truly trust? It's a question that might never have a definitive answer, but it's one worth wrestling with. And don't forget to check out the show notes for further reading and resources if this case has sparked your curiosity. Remember, the truth is out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered.